But just after 10:22 a.m., that calm was shattered. A home security camera across the street happened to be recording. What it captured was this. In a single second, the house was gone. 3 homes reduced to rubble. An ordinary morning became something the neighborhood would never forget. Windows were shattered blocks away. Smoke rose into a quiet sky that had moments earlier been calm. Neighbors stepped into the street, unsure of what they just witnessed, but they immediately came to the aid of their fellow neighbors. Within minutes, fire crews and rescue teams arrived. Rustic Ridge Drive became an active disaster scene. As crews worked through the rubble, the scale of what had happened began to come into focus. 6 people would not survive. At the center of the explosion was a married couple, Paul and Heather Orovitz. Their home at 141 Rustic Ridge Drive was the one that exploded. Paul, 56, initially survived the blast. For 4 days, he fought through catastrophic injuries before ultimately succumbing to them. He was deeply involved in Plum's youth soccer community, serving as its treasurer for years. Heather, 51, served as Plum's Director of Community Development. She worked closely with residents on projects shaping the borough's future. Also killed was Michael Thomas, 57, Plum's borough manager. He held a role at the center of the town's planning and progress. Kevin Sabonia, 55, was another life taken that morning. He was remembered for his humor, generosity, and deep devotion to his family. And then there was Casey Clontz, 38, and his 12-year-old son, Keegan. Casey worked for People's Gas and was known as a friendly, involved neighbor and a devoted father. Keegan was just weeks away from starting middle school. He played youth football and rarely left his dad's side. Families who had spent years building their lives along Rustic Ridge Drive were suddenly displaced. The explosion didn't just destroy homes, it shattered a community. Plum Borough is no stranger to explosions. In the years leading up to the Rustic Ridge disaster, multiple home explosions had already occurred within the community. One of the earliest documented incidents occurred in 1996, when a house explosion on Regency Drive killed an older woman. Investigators later determined the explosion was linked to a natural gas leak. Another explosion occurred on the same street in the mid-1990s. In that case, a man attempting to take his own life triggered a small gas explosion that blew out the bricks of the back of his home. More than a decade later, another major explosion struck the borough. On March 5, 2008, a home in Plum's Holiday Park neighborhood along Mardi Gras Drive exploded with devastating force. The blast destroyed the home, killed 1 resident, seriously injured a child, and damaged 11 nearby homes. Investigators later determined the explosion was caused by a 2-inch natural gas line that had been struck during excavation work roughly 5 years earlier. In April 2022, a home on Hialeah Drive in Plum's Holiday Park neighborhood was leveled late at night. 5 members of the family were hospitalized, but survived the blast. A subsequent review by the PUC concluded that public utility gas equipment was not responsible for the explosion. 5 home explosions with potentially 5 different causes, and those are the ones verified. While no single cause has been linked to all of them, at least 3 of the 5 were caused by natural gas, whether intentional or accidental. As of March 2026, new information has come to light regarding the 2022 explosion. According to local police investigators, the explosion was allegedly caused intentionally by the father living inside the home. Authorities say he manually manipulated a gas line connected to a dryer, releasing natural gas inside the home while his family slept. He now faces more than a dozen felony charges, including attempted homicide, aggravated arson, and causing or risking a catastrophe. Even if each of these explosions had a different cause, the frequency alone is difficult to ignore. 5 explosions in roughly 30 years. On paper, investigators say the incidents aren't connected, but the people of Plum deserve to know why this keeps happening here. Why do they keep happening here? Three natural gas wells operated by Penco Oil Company were located within roughly 2,500 feet of the home. Gas from 2 of these wells traveled through a 4-inch plastic suction pipeline to a compressor station, where pressure was increased to move the gas through the system. According to this theory, that pressure had been rising for months. In January of 2023, it measured around 13 psi. By April, it had climbed to 27. By July, approximately 42. And on the morning of August 12th, it reportedly reached 63 psi. At those levels, the pipeline may have become dangerously overpressurized. The regulators designed to control that pressure were allegedly failing. And this wasn't the first sign of trouble. The same section of pipeline had reportedly leaked once before in 2017. Just 4 days before the explosion, Peoples Gas reportedly identified a malfunctioning regulator in the system. It was no longer maintaining safe pressure. Despite this, the wells continued producing gas, and the line remained overpressurized. Allegedly, the pipeline developed multiple leaks, including a 2.5-inch wide leak on its underside. At the pressure recorded that morning, gas could have been escaping at more than 150 cubic feet per hour. And because this was raw production gas, it likely did not contain the odorant typically added to residential natural gas, making it effectively odorless. The gas may have seeped into the ground behind the home, slowly migrating through the soil until it reached the basement. By the morning of August 12th, that basement may have already been filled with gas. Inside was a residential water heater. At around 8:29 a.m., it reportedly began making loud, unusual noises. Concerned, the Orovitz family invited several neighbors and friends to help investigate. At approximately 10:08 a.m., the gas line connected directly to the house was shut off, but the heater didn't stop running. According to this theory, it may have continued operating by drawing in and burning the gas already present in the air, turning the basement itself into fuel. Then, at 10:22 a.m., the gas ignited. The explosion vaporized the home, destroyed 2 neighboring homes, damaged surrounding houses, and claimed 6 lives. Investigators have publicly confirmed that the explosion originated from inside the home at 141 Rustic Ridge Drive, and that potential external sources, including pipelines, wells, and utility infrastructure, and not identified as direct causes. As of mid-2024, the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission (PUC) Safety Division concluded its portion of the review, stating that it found no evidence linking public utility natural gas equipment to the cause of the explosion. The companies named in the lawsuits have denied responsibility, and the claims remain allegations that must still be proven in court. But the theory outlines a chilling sequence. A pipeline becomes overpressurized. A leak forms. Odorless gas escapes into the ground. It migrates into the home, and inside the basement, it finds an ignition source. If that sequence is correct, the cause may have started outside the home, long before anyone inside realized that something was wrong. However, not everyone believes the cause began outside the home. It's possible the origin was much closer. Another possibility is that the explosion was the result of human error inside the home. In the hours leading up to the blast, several neighbors and friends gathered in the basement to investigate the strange noises coming from the water heater. The home where the explosion occurred had reported issues with its hot water tank before the disaster. At approximately 10:08 a.m., the gas line connected directly to the heater was shut off. However, investigators have never publicly confirmed exactly which valves were turned or what adjustments may have been made during those final minutes. Natural gas systems can be complex. Turning the wrong valve, damaging a fitting, or accidentally releasing gas into an enclosed space can quickly create a dangerous buildup. If gas accumulated in the basement and encountered an ignition source, such as the water heater's pilot flame, it could trigger a powerful explosion. But as of the latest updates, no official determination has been made linking the water heater or any specific element to the cause. Another variation of this theory suggests something different entirely, that the water heater itself may have failed catastrophically without the presence of natural gas. It is known that the Orovitz home had been dealing with water heater issues before the explosion. So the question becomes, what if someone attempted to fix or adjust the heater and something went wrong? But to understand that possibility, we need to look at what a water heater explosion actually looks like.
Because this steam is just erupting everywhere and completely disintegrating. It's different. It's more elegant.
Yes, it was like a lovely, delicate water heater.
If this is what a water heater explosion looks like, catastrophic as it is, I don't think it would completely decimate a multi-story home and burn two neighboring ones to the ground. There is currently no public evidence confirming that human error caused the explosion. In fact, one detail complicates this theory. One of the victims, Casey Clontz, worked for Peoples Gas, a natural gas distribution company. If anyone present had experience working with gas systems, it would likely have been him. And why would he bring his son with him if he thought there was any danger? And according to the families of the victims, their loved ones would not have knowingly taken risks involving gas lines or utilities. Without definitive findings from investigators, the human error explanation remains possible, but unproven. But there is another possibility that shifts the focus away from the house entirely, and instead looks beneath it. A third theory suggests the explosion may be connected to the geology beneath the neighborhood itself. Parts of western Pennsylvania, including Plum, sit above a network of abandoned coal mines and extensive natural gas infrastructure. In addition, parts of the borough have experienced underground mine fires, including the Boyce Park and Renton mine fires, which burned slowly for years before being extinguished in 2002 and 2021 respectively. In some cases, gas can migrate through underground voids, old mine tunnels, or fractured rock layers, created by decades of mining activity. If that gas reaches the surface, it can enter nearby structures, particularly basements. The neighborhood surrounding Rustic Ridge Drive is also located near multiple natural gas wells, which introduces another potential pathway for gas migration. Investigators examining the area have found no mine shafts or boreholes directly beneath the home. But given the region's long history of mining and gas extraction, some residents have questioned whether unseen activity underground could still have played a role. For now, that possibility remains largely speculative and is generally considered the least likely of the three explanations. Based on the information that has been publicly released so far, I personally believe the most plausible explanation is a natural gas leak that eventually migrated into the home and ignited the water heater. The explosion originated inside the basement, and reports of water heater problems shortly before the blast align with that possibility. And if you see the footage itself, the explosion resembles a big fireball, and that fireball, in my opinion, cannot be caused by anything other than gas. But until investigators officially determine the cause, it remains only a theory. And that's the most unsettling part of this story. In the immediate aftermath, emergency crews secured the disaster scene. Community organizations and volunteers mobilized quickly. Church groups opened their doors. Within days, residents gathered for vigils and candlelight memorials across the borough. People placed flowers, handwritten notes, and reminders of the lives lost at the neighborhood entrance. When you're here and you see your neighbors in need, you try to do the little things to help people, a neighbor said. The response showed a community refusing to let tragedy define it. As of March 2026, the official investigation into the explosion is still ongoing, and no definitive cause has been publicly confirmed. Lawsuits filed by the victims' families continue to work their way through the courts. For many people watching the news, the explosion was merely another headline. In some cases, I even came across references to it in unexpected places. A reminder of how far stories like this can travel. But for the people who live here, it was something far worse. While there were house explosions in Plum before the one on Rustic Ridge, none were as catastrophic as this one. It changed my community forever. 6 people lost their lives that morning. Families are still grieving to this very day. A neighborhood, if not the entire town, is forever scarred by this tragedy. And Plum isn't just another town in the news to me. It's my home. I remember the 2022 explosion when the air outside my home filled with smoke and smelled like gunpowder. I remember a year later, in 2023, while I was at the airport, that the news broke that a house on Rustic Ridge Drive had exploded. Growing up, I had personally played soccer on a field right by Rustic Ridge Drive. So to hear of something like that happening that close was deeply devastating. But more devastating than that was the fact that me and my family, we knew some of the victims who had perished in the blast. We were involved in Plum Youth Soccer, especially since I was playing soccer growing up, and we knew some of the lovely folks who helped make it possible, not just me, but all the kids around the borough. But even more jarring was the fact that there's people closer to them than we were. Next door neighbors and families and close friends who deeply knew them. And for them to hear the news of something like that happening so close to home, especially to their loved ones, I just can't imagine how they felt. And especially how they're feeling over 3 years later. I also remember that when the explosion happened, a family member at my home heard the explosion even though my home was 5 minutes away from the blast, and a few miles too. So when I talk about this story, it is not as an observer or an outsider. It's from someone who personally grew up here, and has called Plum Borough home for decades. And like many others here in Plum, I'm left wondering what is happening in a place we call home. While I don't believe all of these explosions are connected to each other, and that all of them have different causes, it's still jarring to me that we have 5 explosions in Plum Borough, in a place we call home, in the past 30 years, and that we don't know exactly what's going on. Which raises a difficult question. While these explosions may not be connected, what caused the explosion on Rustic Ridge Drive? If you found this documentary informative or meaningful, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. I read them all, and respectful discussion helps keep conversations like this alive. If you'd like to support future investigations like this one, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps this work reach more people and allows me to continue researching and documenting stories like this. For those who want to go a step further, you can also support the channel through Patreon or by becoming a channel member. Your support directly helps fund future documentaries and deeper research into stories that deserve attention. Thank you all for watching. Bless you all. Documenting done.